Hi there, my name is Kathleen and I'm an acupuncturist at Acubalance Wellness Center here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about the Acubalance Fertility Diet. So let's get started. So before we get into the dietary recommendations, I want to introduce a couple of concepts and also outline the intentions that I have with this talk. And the first concept I want to talk about is homeostasis. So homeostasis is the body's ability and desire to remain in balance. And for example, like we've all felt this, whenever we step outside and it's cold, we start shivering to maintain that human 37-degree balance, right? And that creates the warmth, and so that warms up your body. So our bodies are self-healing and wise. And the other analogy that I have is that if you cut yourself, you don't have to sit there and like stare at the cut and be like, okay, like body, like now you have to heal a cut. The healing a cut is your body's ability to maintain homeostasis, right? It does that all by itself. And basically it wants to go back to its natural and whole state of being, so it's going to heal that cut without you even needing to think about healing that cut. The concept of homeostasis also applies to some deeper processes in our body. So infertility is almost never just a simple problem that's localized to the reproductive system. It's all too often it's a branch symptom of a underlying problem. And this is why we need to work from the foundational level at which you're introducing your body the right forms of food, making sure that it's gotten the right amount of exercise. And so while your body really wants to maintain homeostasis, it really needs a lot of different inputs to maintain it. Without the right materials, your body's going to have a difficult time maintaining that homeostasis, which is going to lead to inflammation and premature aging, which can contribute to infertility for both men and women. So if we go back to that idea of healing a cut, it takes energy to heal a cut, even if you're not focusing on that cut. So we're going to need some extra calories. If you're healing from an injury, you're also going to use up protein, some vitamin A, some vitamin C, and some zinc. And if you don't have those particular building blocks in your body, it's going to take longer to heal from your injury. And fertility is the same way. So we need to make sure that we're feeding your body the right building blocks to support a healthy uterine environment and robust, so that you can create robust sperm and eggs. And this is one of the tools that we use at Acubalance to get you to your peak fertility potential. So next is my first intention. So my first intention is this idea that your body has a mandate to maintain homeostasis, right? And when this happens and your body is in balance, you experience this just as feeling healthy. You have enough energy to get yourself through the day, and you sleep well, you have really awesome bowel movements. Most importantly, you make good choices in your life because you're coming from a clear place. So my intention is to educate you, because part of my role as your healthcare practitioner is to give you a solid education so that you can become your own healer. And so I found in my years of practice that if I just give a patient a to-do list without really giving them the why they're doing it, I get way less compliance. And so we're going to go into a lot of why we eat the way we eat and why we recommend these particular things when it comes to your fertility diet. So I want to start out with a case study. And I used to practice in California, really close to Silicon Valley, and I had my own practice there. And I saw this woman, and she was 42 years old. She had a really, really stressful job. She was working 60-plus hours a week, doing high-tech sales management, and she had a high FSH. She came to me after she had already had a failed IUI. And I wanted to share this case because she was really reluctant to do a ton of things. And so what she did want to do was, or what she was able to give me was 3 months of acupuncture, and she said, I'll work on my diet. And in our time together, in the 3 months, she was a little bit overweight and she lost 10 pounds, not even from trying. It was just from sticking to this diet that I recommended for her. And um, she was able to conceive during her next IUI cycle. And she now has a beautiful little baby girl. She's 2 years old. I think I saw her on Facebook. She just celebrated her 2-year birthday. And I wanted to share this particular case study with you because here I had a patient who was really reluctant at first to start making changes in her life. And this is mainly due to the fact that she had this really crazy high-stress job where she had a lot of responsibilities and she was managing a lot of people and felt like a lot was riding on her shoulders. That high-stress job was sucking all the energy out of her motivation to even begin to take care of herself. So when she first started working with me, she was eating a lot of things just like in the car on the way to work, or for dinner she was having McDonald's, and so really, really not able to take care of herself. And I totally get it. I can only imagine if you're working, 60 plus hours a week in a job, how do you even have time to cook for yourself, right? Of course you're going to stop by McDonald's on the way home. So as she started incorporating these better choices in her food and in her diet, she started experiencing what I call the trickle-down effect. And what that is she started to choose foods that were based, and she was sorting, this is good for me and this is not good for me. And as she started applying that concept to her body, she also started applying that concept to the bigger picture in her life. And without even realizing it, she started looking at the people in her life and asking herself, does this relationship serve me? And most importantly, she started looking at her job that was sucking all of her time and her energy away from who she wanted to be, and decided that it wasn't serving her anymore. And by the time that we finished working together, she actually quit her job at this high-tech sales company and ended up buying this beautiful piece of property out in Corralitos, which is sort of in the suburbs of Santa Cruz where I was practicing. And she now runs a winery/wedding venue. So she really did a complete 180 turn in her life, and really it all started with just choosing foods that were good for her and not good for her. So as you go through this, you're going to start seeing some shifts, not just with your diet, not just with your body, but you're going to start applying these concepts to the bigger picture of your life. And I want to emphasize that because it brings us to my second intention, which is empowerment. A lot of people are really confused about what the media says about food and diets, and because I'm a complete nutrition science nerd and I can own that, I've spent a lot of hours culling through pages and pages and pages of research to distill it down to a couple of key concepts for you, and I hope that it's easy enough that you can walk away with some attainable goals that you can apply to your life. So my hope is that through education, you're going to feel empowered to make choices about your diet, which will reestablish your relationship with your body so that you can become your own healer. Your body is constantly talking to you, whether you realize it or not. And my role as your healthcare practitioner is to teach you how to listen to your body so that you can become your own best health advocate. Because really, nobody knows your body the same way that you know your body, right? So something I want to stress as well is to not underestimate the small changes. I don't expect everyone to walk away being like, okay, I'm going to have the perfect diet now. But think about changes in terms of degrees. So I have this picture of a sailboat here because if you were to start out in the harbor in Vancouver and you were like, I'm going to set sail and try to make it to Hawaii, and you plot out your trajectory, and let's say you make a mistake and you're off by 1 degree. So by the time you get to where Hawaii should be, that 1 degree is going to put you in a completely different place in the world, right? And so the same thing applies to your health. 1 degree of changes, or changes happen in small degrees, right? And so let's say you're able to eat a good breakfast. That is a 1 degree change. Let's say you're able to incorporate some healthy fat in your life. That's another degree. Let's say you are able to exercise 30 minutes a day. That's a third degree. And each one of these degrees adds up to where you're going to be with your health, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months down the line. The next concept I want to introduce is epigenetics, and I promise I will get to the food part soon. So epigenetics is a branch in science that is being studied now, and it's the idea of the ability to switch on and off genes via external or environmental factors. And so what that means is, yes, you are born with the set of genetics that you are born with, but what you do in your lifetime, how you eat, how you exercise, how you sleep, all that stuff is going to have an effect on your expression of your genetics. And so just because you are born with a family hereditary problem of maybe developing diabetes down the line, if you eat well, you may not necessarily develop type 2 diabetes, even though you have a genetic predisposition for that. A example that I'd like to use is if you think about a plant, and let's say you've neglected this plant. It's been sitting in the corner of your office. It's not getting any sun. You remember to water it every once in a while. It's not looking so hot, right? Its leaves are sort of brown and droopy and not so happy. Well, what happens when you take that plant and you move it into a nice sunny window and you remember to water it and you go to the store and you pick up some nice fertilizer for it, it's going to come back to life, right? And in this analogy, I like it because we haven't really changed out the root structure. We haven't really switched out the plant itself, but its expression is now different because we were able to take care of it. And this is what we're doing with acupuncture, with the laser therapy that we've brought into Acubalance, with the diet that I'm going to introduce here. We're really giving that plant some external feedback so that it can come back to life. So the same thing is happening when I see folks who are going through a low ovarian reserve. So let's say you've been diagnosed with low ovarian reserve. There's nothing that we can do to create more eggs, right? Like you're born with the amount of eggs that you're going to be born with and live with for the rest of your life. But we can change the reserves, and we can change the quality of those reserves by making sure we take care of your body. So the next slide, we're finally getting to the diet part. So at this point, you're probably thinking, when is she going to talk about food already? But this is where we start. This is a great quote by Michael Pollan, who is a journalist and food researcher, and this is something that we really recommend at Acubalance. You want to eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. And what we mean by that is eat real food. So we're staying away from processed foods here, things that come in plastic. You don't want to eat too much food, and we want to stick to mostly plants. And we'll talk about why that is in a moment. Our fertility diet is based off of a study called the Harvard Nurses Study that was published in 2008, and it took a look at 18,555 women who were trying to get pregnant and analyzed what was going on with the women who were able to get pregnant. And so what they found is a slow carbohydrate, whole food, mostly plant-based diet increased fertility by almost 6-fold. And I can't talk about nutrition and diets without talking about macronutrients, because this is how we're going to break down our foods. So the 3 macronutrients are going to be your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. And I like this picture because it's basically got everything in this meal. So you've got a nice piece of fish there, you've got some good animal protein, there's going to be some good fats in there, and the beans represent your carbohydrates, and there's definitely going to be some good carbohydrates there. So the first macronutrient I'm going to talk about is carbohydrates. And I know that carbohydrates nowadays is sort of being demonized the same way fat was a few years ago, and I want to stress that neither fat nor carbs are the bad guy. It's more about how we eat in balance and and what we eat is important. So carbohydrates, we absolutely need carbohydrates because it feeds our brains. But the type of carbohydrate that you choose is going to make a difference. And so we break down carbohydrates in slow fats versus slow carbs versus fast carbs. So a slow carbohydrate is a carbohydrate that's not going to spike your blood sugar. And so if you have a slow carbohydrate like, let's say, vegetables have some great carbohydrates in it. If you wanted to do quinoa or amaranth, if we're going to stick to whole grains, that's a slow carbohydrate. So what it's going to do is it's just going to give you a nice little boost in energy and then sort of a low dip, right? So a nice little boost and up and down. So that's the sort of blood sugar we want to be having throughout the day. What we don't want to be having is this like blood sugar spike and then crash, and then spike and crash. And so what that is a fast carb. So pastas and breads, tortillas, things like that is really going to spike your blood sugar. And that is the amount of blood sugar spiking that happens is categorized by the glycemic index. And so slow carbs are going to have a low glycemic index and fast carbs are going to have a high glycemic index. And you can look on our website, acubalance.ca, and there's a free ebook on that website. If you just do a search for the fertility diet, you're going to come up with that free ebook. And in it, we go a little bit more into depth about what the glycemic index is. But again, we want to be sticking to lower glycemic index foods. So back to that Harvard nurses study that this diet is mostly based off of, we found that diets that are high in refined or fast carbs increased odds of ovulatory infertility. So diets that were really high in pastas and breads are going to inhibit your ability to ovulate. So there we go. And if you have PCOS, you definitely want to be avoiding flour. The next macronutrient I want to talk about is fats. And I have to give you a little bit of a history lesson because I need to go into the history of why fat has become vilified, because I'm working against almost 70 years of nutrition propaganda, and because there's so much misleading information out there about what fats are good for you, what fats are bad for you, and so I'm just going to really break it down for you. So in the 1920s, coronary heart disease was so rare in America that when a young internist, Paul Dudley White, introduced the ECG to detect the presence of arterial blockages to his colleagues at Harvard, he was basically laughed out of the room, and all of his colleagues told him to concentrate on a more profitable branch of medicine, which is funny now because heart disease is one of the leading killers in North America right now. Fast forward to the 1940s, and Ansel Keys, that's the gentleman on that time cover on the left there, he started hypothesizing the connection of fat and heart disease. And so he presented his theory, at this time it was a theory, at the 1955 World Health Organization meeting in Geneva, and he was met with a lot of criticism. And so this prompted him to start his study, which was called the 7-country study. And that was started in 1958. And even today, this is the premier study that upholds the fat is bad theory. And so his conclusion was that nations who ate more animal fat had higher rates of heart disease. What he did not tell you and what he did not disclose in his study is he selected 7 countries to study, but in reality, he studied 22 countries. And when you look at the information from all 22 countries, the correlation of high fat and high rates of heart disease basically disappears. And even in his own paper, he sort of glances over this, sugar is also not good for you idea, but then he then switches back to, but fats are really the bad guy. And even though Ansel Keys lived up to 100 years old, even he contradicted his dietary advice. So he ate a ton of calf's liver, which has a ton of saturated fat in it, and he ate a lot of Canadian bacon. And they both have lots of concentrated saturated fat. And then in 1955, so right around the same time, Dwight Eisenhower suffered his first heart attack. And all of his doctors told him, you need to decrease saturated fat and increase your vegetable oils and increase your carbs. And this American president continued to get fatter and fatter, and his cholesterol continued to rise even though he was doing all the things that his doctors were basically telling him to do. In 1969, Eisenhower died from heart attack after about a dozen cardiac episodes. So this was the perfect storm. And opening that big food industry needed, because this was also around the time that women were starting to get back into, or starting to go into the workplace, and women were having limited time to prepare food for their families. And at the same time, the media coverage was all about, having low-fat or fat-free foods, and that was the dietary recommendations at the time. The problem is that when you take fat out of food, it doesn't taste that great. And so then to make things palatable, you have to add sugar to it. And so this is what a lot of processed food does, is it takes fat out so that they can put that low-fat title onto the packaging, but they also are adding a lot of sugar into it. So be really wary of products that have low fat in the title, or no fat, or non-fat. So this prompts the high-carb, the low-fat diet that we still are hooked on today, and it contributes to many of our modern-day diseases, such as diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and strokes. And today, many subsequent studies have demonstrated that saturated fats do not contribute to heart disease and obesity in the same way it was once believed to. In fact, the problem is sugar. And the amount of sugar that we eat, the average Canadian eats about 88 pounds of sugar a year, which is way too much. And so you can see the difference in the sort of mainstream media, like mainstream media starting to pick up on this as well, because this Time magazine cover was published in 2014, and it's telling you to eat butter, which is one of the demonized fats in the world. So when I talk about fat, it's important to know which fats are good for you and which fats are bad for you. And so you can break it down, because fats come in 4 different flavors. So saturated fats are easy to identify because they are the ones that are solid at room temperature. And so butter and bacon and coconut fat, grass-fed red meat has a lot of saturated fat in it. And so this is the one that most docs from the 1950s and up have told you not to eat, and this is the one that has contributed to strokes and heart disease. So many studies now, including a comprehensive meta-analysis in the Annals of Internal Medicine that was published in 2013, have concluded that there's actually no significant evidence that saturated fat increases your risks for cardiovascular disease, and actually consuming the right types of saturated fat in moderation can help you decrease body fat. The exception there is palm oil, because it will actually increase your LDLs. Monounsaturated fats are the ones that are like olive oils, avocados, walnuts, peanut oil, macadamia nuts, and they're the ones that nobody really has any problems with. They raise HDL without raising LDL, so that's a good family of fats there. Polyunsaturated fats are also good for you. So they come in 3 different flavors. So omega-3s come as DHA, which is the sea-based fat, so it's fish or spirulina, or ALA, which is from hemp and chia seeds. DHEA is the more efficient of the 2, and so it's a little better to try to stick to the sea-based omega-3s. And then omega-6s are not necessarily bad for us, but we eat it in not the right ratios. And so we want to be eating at a ratio of of about half omega-3s and half omega-6s. And right now, because a lot of folks have diets that are really high in red meat, we eat about 14 to 25 times more omega-6s than we really should be. So you really want to be, maybe increasing the fish a little bit and decreasing the beef and red meats. The one that is bad that everyone can sort of agree on now is trans fats. So trans fats were a artificially created fat that was made by injecting hydrogen into vegetable oil. What that did is it prolonged the shelf life of that fat. And so manufacturers really loved it because they could manufacture a bunch of this and then keep it on the shelf for a while. The FDA just came out with a ruling that by 2018 trans fats are going to be banned. And so they're giving food manufacturers basically until 2018 to get trans fats out of the public health. There were 11 New York counties that enlisted bans on trans fats in 2007, and there was a 4.5% reduction in deaths related to cardiovascular disease in those 11 counties. And so really important to make sure that you're eating the right fats. I'm going to send you back to our website. If you go on our website, I just wrote a blog post about this. It's called Fat is Fat. Fat, F-A-T, is fat, P-H-A-T. And I go into a lot more detail about what examples of good fats versus bad fats that you could be eating are. The important thing is that as you decrease the unhealthy carbs in your life, so as you're decreasing breads and pastas, you want to make sure that you're upping the healthy fats because those are our two sources of energy. So carbohydrates and fat is how we fuel our day. And if you take out one form of fuel, you want to replace it with another. And so taking out the bad carbs, so taking out breads and pastas, you want to up, things like avocado and some fish and some good nuts to make sure that you have that sustained energy throughout your day. Otherwise, you're going to be really cranky. So the next one is, I get a lot of questions about dairy from my patients. Low fat versus full fat is going to be important. So from that Harvard nurses study, low fat, women who had low fat milk or low fat dairy products had less rates of pregnancy. And women who had full fat in moderation, so this is not just like a free-for-all, you want to just make sure that you're eating it in balance, had higher rates of pregnancy. The asterisk here is that if you have an allergy, if you have PCOS, or if you have endometriosis, you definitely want to be staying away from dairy completely. It's going to make those conditions worse. The last macronutrient I'm going to talk about is protein. And this is probably the least controversial. But protein, again, from the Harvard nurses study, they found that more protein from plants than from animal sources increases fertility. And so I've given you a couple of options in terms of vegetable proteins. So legumes are a really good source of vegetable protein. Nuts and seeds are my go-to snack in between meals. And fermented soy is also a good form of vegetable protein. In terms of animal proteins, I think that small amounts of animal protein should be a part of every healthy fertility diet. You want to try to choose grass-fed, organic, or pasture-raised whenever possible. And my favorite animal protein would be like those short-lived fishes that don't accumulate all those heavy metal toxins. So we're looking at things like mackerel, trout, herring, sardines, some wild salmon, which is wonderful. I loved moving to Vancouver because there's an abundance of wild salmon here. It's amazing. So what should your meals really look like? You should have a solid breakfast. That's very, very important. There's that saying of breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That definitely holds true. And you want to be eating 3 meals a day with 2 healthy snacks in between. And so, like I said, my favorite go-to snack is nuts. So I think people struggle the most with breakfast. And so my typical breakfast, I like to share this with patients just because they're like, oh, I'm so busy. Like, I don't have time to have breakfast in the morning. So if you're having a little bit of limited time in the morning, what I do is I take one of those muffin tins and make like basically make a batch of omelets. So I do scrambled eggs and some vegetables in there, maybe a little bit of bacon or a little bit of ham or something like that, and then just make one big batch, put them in muffin tins, bake it, and then stick that in the fridge. And then every morning I just have a little omelet cup that I can just take with me to work. Um, the other thing is on the website, Kaylee, our naturopath here, has this really wonderful recipe for what she calls life-changing bread, and throwing some avocado on top of that, maybe some peanut butter. That's a really good, easy breakfast in the morning. In terms of meal composition, you should be eating about 50% vegetables. So again, like we said in the beginning of the talk, you want to be eating mostly vegetables. So 50% vegetables, 25% of a healthy carbohydrate, and 25% of a healthy protein. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because while it's not about diet exactly, it's so, so important. So you could be eating like the best, most organic, grass-fed, all that fancy labeled stuff. But if you're eating in a place um, where your body's not going to accept it, then you're not actually going to process and digest all that food very well. So our nervous system basically lives in two different states. It lives in the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight mode, or it lives in the parasympathetic, which is going to be the rest and digest mode. And the way our nervous system is wired, you can't live with one foot in sympathetic and one foot in parasympathetic. And why that's important is that because when you're in sympathetic mode, this is a necessary mode. Like, this is not a bad place to be because you need to work. And sometimes you may need to run away from, I don't know, tigers or something. But when you're in that sympathetic state, all of your, or most of your blood flow is being sent to your brain so that you can think your way through problems, and it's sent to your limbs so that you can, fight off bears. But what that means is that there's a lack of blood flow going to your internal organs where your digestion is happening, right? The opposite is happening when you're in parasympathetic state. So when you're in parasympathetic state, your blood is being sent to your digestive organs. It's sending signals to your stomach to start making some stomach acid and really start that digestive process going, right? And so what I see so often is what this woman is doing in this corner, which is like she's working and eating at the same time. And she's eating a muffin. So not great food. And then she's trying to eat in a place where all of her blood flow and her entire body is saying like we don't really want to be digesting food right now. What you want to be doing is making sure that you spend some time in your day to live in the parasympathetic and eat while you're in that parasympathetic mode. So making sure that you're actually setting aside your work before you sit down for a meal. Maybe you're sitting down with a good book, or maybe you're sitting down with your family for a family dinner. Like, that's a really important part of eating. And then also, because I want to go back to that empowerment piece that we touched on in the beginning of this lecture here, empowerment really comes from when you are taking charge of your own life. Of when you're not being tied to that epigenetic blueprint that you're born with, and you have to, you know that you have the ability to change your own story, and you have the ability to influence your own life by making the choices that you make. So in addition to the diet suggestions that I've made in this presentation, I just wanted to touch on 3 things. You definitely want to move. Moving is so, so important. It releases endorphins, it regulates blood sugar, it helps combat stress. You want to be active for at least 30 minutes every day. And so an easy way to incorporate this is to try to find ways to make your life harder. Like park your car a little further away from that building you're going to walk to. Take the stairs instead of taking the elevator. All those little things add up. It's beautiful out right now because it's June, and so I've been walking to work instead of taking the bus. Nurture Nurture is also important. You want to put yourself on the agenda and make sure that you're prioritizing your own health and your own life. A lot of times we get caught up in the daily grind of work, of taking care of other people. Um, and so eating a good diet is a really good place to start in terms of nurturing yourself. And then connect, because we are herd animals. And an easy way to connect is through your diet, right? Like sit down and have meals with your friends. Sit down and have meals with your partner, with your spouse, or with your family. And I'm about to wrap up here, but I want to just say that I've tried to keep this talk as general as possible while offering tips that almost everybody can benefit from. So it doesn't matter if you're male or female, or whether you're trying to get pregnant or you're not trying to get pregnant. This is really, it's called the fertility diet, but it's really just a diet for health. If you have a specific condition that you're working against, there are great suggestions in that ebook that I mentioned, so go to acubalance.ca and go download that ebook. But as always, you're going to get the most tailored care when you're working with one of our practitioners, because we really can make sure that we can customize your acupuncture treatments, your laser treatments, your herbal formulas, your supplements, and your diet to make sure that we're getting you to your peak fertility potential there. So then we're going to end on this slide, which is our logo, the Acubalance Wellness Center. There's our website that I've referred back to a couple times in this lecture. And go ahead and download that Acubalance Fertility Diet from our website. And if you are interested in coming in for a little bit more personalized care, we do offer a 15-minute complimentary phone session, so you can always give us a call. The number here is 604-678-8600, and hopefully we get to meet you soon. Alrighty. Hope you had a good time. Bye.